It's time for another book review, and today I'm going to be reviewing Abby Jimenez's newest novel, Say You'll Remember Me. This book just came out and I was so excited to get started reading because I literally love her books. I just recently read a short story by her. It's called Fall Risk, and it was 90 pages and one of the best romances ever. So I knew that her newest novel was going to be a masterpiece. Not only that, but I adored Just for the Summer and couldn't wait to get started with this one. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Just to give you a little blurb before we get started with the review, this book is basically about Samantha and Xavier. Samantha is moving back to her home in California from Minnesota because her mother has dementia and she needs to move back with her family to help take care of her mother. Xavier is from Minnesota. They go on a date, their very first date, the day before Samantha is supposed to leave for California. That very first date ends up being so impactful and memorable that they literally cannot stop thinking about each other. But how are they going to make a relationship work with thousands of miles in between? That is what this book is about, and boy, did it hit me where it hurts. This one was so great, and honestly, it was so relevant to my life and what I've gone through because my husband and I were in a long distance relationship for probably 5 years of our relationship. It was a long time. And so you get the long distance relationship in this book, but the coolest thing about this book is that there's hardly any conflict. There's hardly anything that's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next with that? It's mainly just driven by the romance and the things that happen day to day, which I absolutely loved because you don't get a lot of novels that don't have conflict. You don't get a lot of novels where you're just like, oh, we're in love, but we're far away and there's nothing else that's wrong. That was so cool to read about because Abby Jimenez made this such an enjoyable novel with hardly anything to make it blow your mind, if that makes sense. Because I've read romance novels, let's say by Colleen Hoover, where you have this big twist at the end and you're like, oh my gosh. Or you read books that just have this huge plot twist and there's still the romance and you're like, oh my gosh, what are they gonna do? But this is like real life. This honestly reminded me of a real life romance. This felt like the truest version of a love story that you can get. And I absolutely adored it. So that's my little spiel on that. That's why I loved it so much. But like I said with the plot, there's hardly any conflict. It's basically just a long distance relationship. That's the whole plot. And it's them trying to navigate how to have a romantic relationship with the long distance. There were a couple things at the end that I was like, it's a little too convenient for me. But I'll go into those more in the spoilers, and I'll warn you before I get into the spoilers. Not in the spoilers right now. As far as characters go, I really love Samantha. She's honestly one of my favorite female main characters right now because she did the funniest things. And I listened to this on audiobook, and I actually read a few pages, so I was kind of switching between audiobook and the hardcover. But Samantha, she would do these girly things, like she'd shriek when there were bugs flying around, and it was so relatable. And I loved how Samantha acted like a real person with real relationships. And Abby Jimenez really knows how to write a female main character because she was just so relatable. And she honestly was the perfect middle child. I'm a middle child, so I can definitely tell you her personality matches to a T. Now with Xavier, I had a couple of issues with him. I did feel like you could tell he was written by a woman because he did some things and I was like, wow, that is so romantic. I can't imagine a guy ever doing that. So, my opinion, but there were some things I was like, that's a little too over the top, I think. Or that's a little too much. And there were times where I was taken out of the story because his character seemed a little too over the top, for lack of a better word. So his character kind of bothered me a little bit. Obviously, he was perfect and I adored him. And as Samantha says, he looks like a Greek god. But there were a couple things that threw me off. And that's one of those things, is he just seemed too perfect. But I still loved his character and I still love the novel. That's just one thing that kind of was like, I don't know how I feel about that. Now, honestly, with the long distance relationship, everything that Samantha said she would feel, everything that Xavier said he would feel, I felt that in my soul. Because like I said, I was in a long distance relationship for 5 years with my then boyfriend, now husband. And it was just so hard. It was so hard to make things work. Obviously so worth it in the end. But everything that they felt, everything that Xavier and Samantha felt, I had felt at one time. And it honestly took me back. And I was like, wow, I remember these feelings. I remember how much this sucked. So it was really relatable as a novel, and I really enjoyed reading about Samantha and Xavier's relationship. So I'm going to go ahead and get into spoilers. I don't have a lot of spoilers. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of conflict in this book, so there were no like bam moments where you just have to talk about them. But there was one thing in the plot that was just so convenient. And I'm like, I didn't like it. And that thing is Hank. So Hank just moseys along because he used to work with Xavier's two receptionists. And so they tell him, oh, Xavier needs help. So Hank comes back and says, I'm willing to work for free 3 to 4 times a week. Cool, I could get behind that. But at the end of the novel, when Hank finds, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 more retirees who just wanted to work to help the clinic go and not go under, I was like, ugh, that's way too convenient for me. It would actually have made me felt better had Xavier actually sacrificed something to move to California to be with Samantha, because it didn't feel like he had to, in the end, sacrifice anything because Hank made the clinic survive on non-paid retirees. That just didn't make sense to me. It was too convenient. It pulled me out of the story. I really did not like that aspect of the book, but it was such a tiny part that I didn't really take any stars off for that. But that's just me. Okay, overall, 5 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed this book. If I was going to take it down because of the things that I mentioned in the spoilers, it would be 4.5 out of 5 stars. Still rounded up to 5. So enjoyed this romance novel. It was so light and airy and fun and beautiful and relatable. That's the main thing. It felt relatable and like it was a real romance that you could see just every day out in the street. Probably one of my top reads this year. I love Abby Jimenez, like I said. I highly recommend, if you just read this, go read Fall Risk. It's her short story and it's basically like 90 pages. It was so good. So good for a cute 90-page quick read. I loved that there was hardly any conflict. You don't see a book very often that doesn't have something that's driving it besides the romance. I think Abby Jimenez did an amazing job writing that for us. And I loved our characters besides a few nitpicky things about Xavier. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. I want to know what you thought about this book because I really adored it and I hope you enjoyed it too. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe because I make book reviews all the time, movie reviews, book versus movie reviews, and all kinds of other things. So I will see you guys later. Bye!